Welcome to the greatest show on earth. It's the Take a Shot podcast. I'm just Joshua Gitman and I'm hosting it, and I'm going to be along with the ride with you. What we do on the show, we break down the NBA. We give you the hottest takes. We give you the best debates. We give you the storylines. It's all here for you on the Take Your Shot podcast. And I'm just going along saying my piece for you guys to listen. And today we've got a couple of things that we got to break down. We've got the conference finals, game one of the Mavericks and the Timberwolves. We've got game two of the Celtics and the Pacers. Plus, we've got an unexpected head coach firing that I've got a lot to say about. It's all right here on the Take Your Shot podcast. And we begin with game two of the Eastern Conference Finals as the Boston Celtics get past their terrible twos as they defeat the Indiana Pacers 126 to 110. And what was a competitive game in the first quarter. And then after that, it was all Boston Celtics from there, pretty much outscoring the Indiana Pacers by 18 going after the first quarter, outscored them by 8 in the second quarter, outscored them by 7 in the third. And then in the fourth quarter, Rick Carlisle pretty much gave up after Tyrese Haliburton went down for the Indiana Pacers. In this game for the Boston Celtics, what I saw was much better pace, much better defense. They were playing more towards their game and not the Indiana Pacers game. And the offense revolved around a guy like Jaylen Brown, who we've seen have his highs of highs this postseason and past postseasons. We've seen him have his lows of lows in past postseasons, like game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year. But in this particular series, in these first two games, and quite frankly, I'm going to go out of a limb and say these entire playoffs, Jaylen Brown has been the best player for the Boston Celtics, and he is the reason why the Celtics won this game, why the Celtics finally got past their skid of terrible twos. Because remember, they lost game 2 in the conference finals last year to the Heat. They lost game 2 in the first round this year to the Heat. And they lost game 2 in the second round, this year to the Cleveland Cavaliers. It has been Boston giving up home court every single time. And by the efforts of Jaylen Brown, Boston finally did something that they couldn't do in a while, actually protect home court. And now they are in a position where if they just win one of the games in Indiana, this series most likely will be ending very quickly. And Jaylen Brown in this game had 40 points. He was by far, as I mentioned, the best player in this game. He shot 14 of 27 from the field, 4 of 10 from the three-point line. And Jaylen Brown has been the guy who's been the point guard. He's been asserting himself. He's been getting other guys open. He has been the leader for the Celtics team. And I'm not putting pressure on Jason Tatum because that's what the beauty of the Celtics team is. Of course, we criticize Tatum, but the fact that they have guys like Jaylen Brown, have guys like Derek White, and Drew Holiday who can step up offensively at any point shows that Jason Tatum doesn't necessarily need to be the guy all the time. What I learned yesterday is, okay, Tatum didn't have the best game. He didn't have a great game in the first half. Of course, is everyone going to critique him? Yes. Is he impacting the game other ways? Yes. But at the same point, Jaylen Brown has made up Tatum scoring, and Tatum is impacting games elsewhere, as I just mentioned. And that is the beauty of the Celtics team. This is why Boston is so elite, because you have 4 guys you can trust bringing the ball up. You have 4 guys that you can trust scoring the ball, and potentially 5 guys when Porzingis comes back you trust to score the ball. That is what is so scary about the Celtics team, and that is why the Celtics have won all the time this year. That's why they got to 64 wins. That's why they've beaten up on teams all year, because they just have too much for teams. And when you look at this game, it wasn't like Indiana played that poorly. Indiana was playing decent for a little bit, but then Boston just outplayed them offensively. They beat the Pacers at their own game. Boston got more fast break points. They got more shots in the paint. They got more three-point shots attempted, which we know because all Boston does is shoot threes. This is Boston's game, and it works to perfection sometimes, but it also hinders them. But when you're playing a team like Indiana who doesn't have the best defense, Boston needs to expose the Indiana's flawless defense, and Indiana, they can't really do anything because their defense in the paint in game 1 was awful. Their defense in the paint in this game was awful. I feel like every single time Boston drove downhill, they scored because Indiana showed no resistance at the rim. I love Miles Turner. I love Pascal Siakam, but there really wasn't any resistance, and Boston got to the cup easily, and that forced Rick Carlisle to make the adjustment to collapse the paint a little bit more, which opened up the three-point shots, and it pretty much pulled Boston away in the third quarter, and that was that for the basketball game. So the fact that Indiana showed no resistance has been a concern, but Boston is taking advantage of that, and that's what matters. They are doing something that we've been begging them to do for years now. Beat teams you're supposed to beat, handle teams that you're supposed to handle. Of course, they should have lost game one, but at the same point, they got it done. They won. That's all that matters. That's what we see on the series board. Boston led 1-0. They won this game now, and they are in a position now to close out this series pretty quickly, which is something that we expect them to do in every series in this Eastern Conference because it has been a breeze for Boston. Butler out, Rozier out, Donovan Mitchell out for a little bit, Jared Allen out the whole series. Boston should be cruising past the Eastern Conference. And we're not saying, oh, this was an incredible performance by Boston. It is something that we expect out of the Boston Celtics every night. This is what we want to see from Boston. This is the team that we saw in the regular season that hasn't transitioned into the postseason when it really matters in the past couple of seasons. But can this be the year? Because you have the opportunity with Minnesota and Dallas. I love Minnesota. I love Dallas. And I had Minnesota beating Boston in the finals, but still, it's much easier than playing the Denver Nuggets. Minnesota knocked out the defending champions. Boston is in a much better position right now than any team, in my opinion, in NBA history has been before to win an NBA title. That is how good of a position Boston's in, and they need to take advantage of it. And Jaylen Brown right now has been the best player for the Celtics. Maybe Tatum will need to take that position later, but right now Boston's just doing what they're supposed to do. They're winning basketball games at home, and they're protecting home court, which is what matters. Also in this game, you've got to give props to Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. I thought both took advantage of their matchup against TJ McConnell, and TJ McConnell's a great defender, and those guys really stood out. They hit their shots. They got into the paint against a smaller TJ McConnell because I love TJ McConnell. I think he's a dog. TJ McConnell is one of my favorite players still playing right now. But Boston's height, Boston's length, it's just greater, and that's just an example of it. Boston has everybody in their lineup 6'5" or above, and they have to take that height for their advantage, and that's why they're getting into the paint easily. Of course, Indiana has the worst paint defense in the league, but part of the reason why Boston has continued to dominate in the paint is because they're just bigger, they're just stronger, and then they're just the more physical team than the Indiana Pacers. And Derek White and Peyton Pritchard took advantage of that. Peyton Pritchard also getting his shots on the outside as well. 2 for 2 from there. It was a pretty flawless game for him, along with Derek White. Jason Tatum had, as I mentioned, a struggling first half. He wasn't playing that great, but he got it going a little bit in the second half. It would have been a concern considering that the Pacers were still in this game. They were down 16. They cut it to 2. They made it a little interesting. And then all of a sudden, Boston, by the efforts of Tatum, got back to where they were supposed to be and won this game in convincing fashion. So you got to give credit to Jason Tatum there. He executed when it mattered, and that's all you can ask from a player, because I don't care if you have 40 points. If you're in a tie game, you're tight in the stretch, it's a close game, and then you fold. That is not what matters here. You need to perform and you need to execute at when the game matters. And that's what Tatum did. When the game got a little bit tighter, the game sort of slowed down for the Celtics. They were missing a couple of shots. Tatum got them back to where they were earlier, and which was up double digits. And you got to give credit where credit is due there. And Boston has been flawless all around. And even Al Horford, not necessarily this game, but the last game got going a little bit. So if Boston can continue to consistently produce on the offensive end, because we know sometimes they rely too much on threes. It's not going to be perfect, but if they can get in the paint on this Pacers team and they can show they can get into the paint at will with their strength, their physicality, and their dominance, getting away from the three-point shot a little bit because they rely on it too much, Boston can have another formula to win basketball games. Because quite frankly, I've never liked Boston relying too much on the three-point shots. It's just something that makes me a little bit nervous with that team because, of course, you can win games by a lot if you're hitting the threes, but if you're not shooting the threes well, it's ultimately a killer, and then you keep on shooting them, which is something Boston does. Even if they don't shoot them well, Boston continues to shoot threes. And at the end of the day, when you do that and you're struggling, it's going to let teams get back into games. It's going to let teams extend leads. And so the fact that Boston's finding other ways to win, getting dirty, getting themselves in the paint, drawing more fouls, that is something that has shown to me personally that Boston may be ready to win a title. I still don't trust him 100% because I got to see Jason Tatum play a little bit better. But in this game, Boston showed another way they can win a basketball game, which is attacking in the paint. And if they can continue to do that in the series, Minnesota and Dallas may have to be worried about what Boston can not only do from the perimeter, but in the paint, which makes them scary, especially when Porzingis comes back with his pick and pop game. So continue to do your job if you're the Celtics. Get this series done in 5. You can just try to split on the road and make this series quick, because if you let Indiana get those 2 games, all the questions are going to pop up again. Oh, here's Boston choking again. Here's Boston letting games go they're not supposed to. So as long as Boston executes, shows they're the better team, which they clearly are in this series. I love Indiana. I've loved their run, but Boston is by far the superior team. Boston has to show that, and they have to assert their dominance, and they're doing a great job so far. But let's go on to the Indiana Pacers sides of things in this series, as an unfortunate injury occurred with Tyrese Haliburton hurting his hamstring once again. He had a hamstring injury earlier in the regular season, which put him out, if I'm not mistaken, 10 games. And that basically, for the rest of the season, in the regular season, he's picked up his game in the postseason. But for a majority of the second half of the season, he was slowed down. He didn't have the production, the level of efficiency he had in the first half of the season because of the hamstring issue. And here we go again. It is once again coming up for Tyrese Haliburton. He looked shaken up a little bit in game 1, and this game 2, when he left the third quarter, basically Rick Carlisle gave up. He put in his subs. Even when it was like a 12, 14-point game with 6 minutes to go in the fourth, Rick Carlisle basically conceded the game, because without Tyrese Haliburton, it's pretty much not going to be a series. And we don't know the status of Tyrese Haliburton. We want him to come back, of course, but this hamstring injury has been lingering him all season, and you don't know what happened, because most times when somebody just goes to the locker room and comes and doesn't come back in a postseason situation, when a lot of players fight off the injuries and try to push themselves, that is definitely a concern for Indiana, because game 3 is, of course, is a must-win game. No team's ever come back from 3-0, and they are going to need Tyrese Haliburton to, quite frankly, win a game in the series, because if Indiana doesn't, I expect Boston to sweep the Pacers. That's right, sweep the Pacers. There is no reason in hell that the Celtics should lose a single game to this team without Tyrese Haliburton. So this may be an absolute brutal blow to the Indiana Pacers. And you look at it for Boston, as I said earlier, analyzing the Celtics, this is the easiest path for them, and they've gotten really lucky. But at the end of the day, for the Pacers, this is just a brutal blow. And you look back at it now, and you had game 1 right there, right in your pocket, right in your hands. You had it, and you lost it. And ultimately, Boston's too good of a team to have that bad of a performance in consecutive games and keep you winning in consecutive games. And then you look at it the other way. Indiana's been shooting the ball great. They shot the ball great in game 7 against the Knicks. They shot the ball great game 1 against the Celtics. It's like, how many times are you going to shoot that great? I don't care how historic your offense is. I don't care that Indiana had the most historic offense in the league of all time. This Pacers team is not going to shoot 70% every single game, and it proved right in this game. They struggled from the three-point line. They shot 37%. They only shot 52% from the field, which is great, but it is not the 70%, 64 to 70% that they shot against the New York Knicks. They shot against the Boston Celtics. And in order for the Pacers to beat the Celtics, considering how lackluster their defense is, they are going to have to score the ball. And that's something they're not going to do every night, because if a team were able to shoot that well every single night, they would win the title. And Indiana just cannot do that. And no other team, to be quite honest, has ever done that. So Indiana has to take advantage of the games that they are stringing, the games that they are shooting well. And that was game 1. And they ultimately blew it because of the missed inbounds play. And now I'm calling it, this series is over to me. I don't see any way that Indiana wins two at home, even though they're 6-0 at home, and there's still a chance they can go 2-0 at home. I just don't see it because in this playoffs, Boston's 4-0 on the road. Boston has just been as perfect on the road as Indiana has been at home. And Boston is going to get one of those games. I'm telling you, it may be in 5 now, but this series, to me, especially, even if Tyrese Haliburton comes back, he's healthy a little bit, but he's not going to be 100%. Even if he's somewhat healthy, not going to be there to his full maximum ability, and that's going to hinder the Pacers, and everything revolves around Tyrese Haliburton. If you're Indiana, I love TJ McConnell, but he cannot score 30 points just like Tyrese Haliburton. He cannot get 15 assists and collapse the defense like Tyrese Haliburton. This is just brutal if you're the Indiana Pacers, and you had it, and you lost it, and in this game, not only did they shoot the ball terrible, they turned the ball over 16 times. Compared to Boston's 10, they didn't get to the free throw line as many times as the Celtics. Guys like Aaron Nesmith, who had a great game 7, had a great game 1, were struggling. Miles Turner, who had a amazing game 1, as I said, because he took advantage of the Horford matchup, he didn't really have a great game in this one, and it was because Boston made the adjustment. They put Jaylen Brown on Miles Turner for a little bit, which was an interesting adjustment by Joe Mazzulla, but it looked like it worked because Miles Turner was struggling a little bit, and they put Al Horford on Siakam, and Siakam got 28 points. Siakam got what he wanted in this game, and it was an interesting adjustment by Joe Mazzulla, and for some reason it worked, so he might continue to stick with that, but Miles Turner, because of that adjustment, struggled, and Miles Turner, that's, to me, inexcusable, because I don't care if you're have Jaylen Brown or Al Horford. It's probably better with Jaylen Brown because Jaylen Brown is 6 inches shorter than you. You need to get in the post. You need to give him foul trouble, and he did early. He looked like he was giving Jaylen Brown some foul trouble early. I think he had 2 early fouls, Jaylen Brown. But for the rest of the game, I didn't see Miles Turner attack. I didn't see Miles Turner want to push it to the basket, want to post up. And Miles Turner is going to have to do that and take advantage of the matchup at hand because Indiana is going to need every single advantage they could possibly get in the series if they want any shot at winning, quite frankly, even a game in this series. And then, of course, Andrew Nembhard, he's the only real player other than Siakam who played decent for the Pacers. He shot 6 of 12, but everybody other than that really just had a terrible performance. It wasn't the best shooting night for Indiana. They didn't really get a lot going. They turned the ball over, and they let a lot of offensive rebounds go to Boston. And if you're Indiana, you cannot let that happen because you're giving a great offensive team who's trying to stay par with your offense just extra opportunities to score the ball. And the fact that you continue to do that, allow M1s, give up easy layups, that's a problem when you're trying to win with your offense, because if you're just giving up that many extra chance points, it's definitely something that's a concern there. 13 offensive rebounds is unacceptable. And that's all I got to say with this series, man. It was a good run for the Indiana Pacers, but their season is most likely going to be over probably in game 5, which will be Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, and probably next Friday we will be talking about Lights Out Pacers. I would not be surprised. They may get a game, as I said. They may get one because Indiana's been that great at home, but without Tyrese Haliburton being at 100%, the way Boston has been playing right now, the way they've moved the ball, the way they've gotten into paint, and you've got to look at this Indiana team as just not as great talent-wise. They're just at such a disadvantage talent-wise. And you could also go to the fact that Indiana, they had 2 easy series, just like Boston. They got a little bit lucky, just like the Celtics. And it does take luck to win playoff series, but we didn't really get to see Indiana play a true, fully healthy team. I mean, with the exclusion of Porzingis, Boston still is an absolute beast. We didn't see them play a full healthy team because remember, round 1, Bucks didn't have Giannis. They didn't have Dame for the last couple of games in that series. Then in round 2, we know with the Knicks, they've had so many injuries and it's hindered them the entire season in this last series especially. And I'm not going to say that Indiana didn't deserve to win that series, but if New York was a little bit more healthy, would they have probably won the series? Absolutely. So you've got to consider that when evaluating this Indiana Pacers team. And they've had a great run. You've got to give credit to the Indiana Pacers. But the Pacers right now, as you can see on the board, they're scrambling. They just don't know what to do. They're making silly turnovers, and they're just not ready for the moment yet. And it sucks that Haliburton's out, and we'll see how they respond. But I don't think Indiana has any shot in this series for the reasons I previously mentioned. But let's go on from the Indiana Pacers now, and let's transition. Before we get to our Western Conference Finals recap of Game 1, I want to transition to what is a shocking NBA firing, as the Cleveland Cavaliers did something that I thought would have never happened, even though there were rumblings. They fired their head coach, JB Bickerstaff, after 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was 3. I think he was the interim for a little bit after they fired John Beilein. He was the interim for half a season, and they got to the play-in. Then these last 2 seasons, the Cavaliers made the playoffs. They lost in the first round to the Knicks in 5. Then this year, they beat the Magic in 7 to lose to the Celtics in 5. But what was surprising about this firing was, you look at the Cavaliers, you've made it to the second round for the first time since 2018. You made it to the second round for the first time without LeBron James since 1993. This has been the Cavaliers' best season without LeBron James in over 30 years. 30 years. And the fact that Cleveland got a game in Boston, didn't have Jared Allen, didn't have Donovan Mitchell down the stretch in that series, can you really evaluate that series as why JB Bickerstaff got fired? Because I can't do it. Why are you firing a coach who didn't even get the opportunity to have his full roster against the Celtics? If they would have lost it 5 to the Celtics, being fully healthy with Jared Allen, with Donovan Mitchell, okay, it would have been a little bit better. But the fact that the Cavaliers didn't have a full roster, you didn't get to see what they were capable of with their arguably their best player. Well, not arguably, they're easily their best player with Donovan Mitchell, and arguably their second or third best player with Jared Allen. That's how good Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen have been to this basketball team. Of course, they've had the issues with the guards playing together, and Garland and Mitchell, and we'll talk about that in a second. And of course, the big men as well with Jared Allen and Mobley. But they're just still guys who can help score the ball, guys who clearly make an impact for this Cavalier squad. And I just don't understand why we're putting the blame on the coaches. I guess that stars want coaches fired, but you look at a situation like Phoenix with Frank Vogel getting fired. Was it really Frank Vogel's fault, or was it the way the roster was constructed? Because when you've got Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker, they're 3 guards. They're 3 guys who want the ball. Kevin Durant's not a guard, but you know what I mean. 3 guys who want the ball. 3 guys want the ball in their hands, and that's not going to work out. It didn't work out, and I should have known, and the rest of the league should have known, and that is not Frank Vogel's fault. Frank Vogel actually wanted a point guard. JB Bickerstaff maximized this roster. He maximized the team because, yes, of course, even if they were fully healthy, they probably would have not beaten the Celtics, but you still didn't get the chance to see what would have happened. It's still been their best season. So why are you firing the guy who I think's done the best possible job for Cleveland? And you look at the coaching market right now, if you're the Cavs, you've got Kenny Atkinson, James Borrego, JJ Redick. I mean, there's not really a big name that can make this team better. And you're just going to get a younger coach, someone who hasn't been acclimated with this team for 3 seasons. And it's probably going to take an adjustment. And I just don't see any way that this Cleveland team could get any better. And the fact of the matter is, this Cavaliers roster has been hindered because Garland and Mitchell don't play well together, and Allen and Mobley don't play well together. And it's most likely, if Mitchell signs the extension, Jared Allen and Darius Garland will get traded. And if Mitchell doesn't, he gets traded, and Allen or Mobley gets traded, and vice versa. Like, this Cleveland team's going to get changed. And then you're firing the coach. The only reason why I could say that the Cavaliers should fire JB Bickerstaff is if Donovan Mitchell didn't like him. Because, of course, right now, Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs are in extension talks. Everyone knows that Donovan Mitchell has been on the trade market for a while. He's been rumored to be traded for a little bit. And Cleveland's hopeful that they are going to sign an extension with Donovan Mitchell. And maybe Donovan Mitchell didn't like JB Bickerstaff. Maybe he wanted him to go. And maybe Cleveland thinks that if they fired JB Bickerstaff, Donovan Mitchell would be more likely to extend. Maybe that's why they maybe value Donovan Mitchell, which they should, over a guy like JB Bickerstaff. But at the same point, you look at how the season ended, how the season went, how the past 2 seasons went with Bickerstaff. It's been great. This Cleveland team's done what they're supposed to be doing. Of course, should they have beaten the Knicks in the first round a couple of years ago? Maybe. But at the same point, they probably weren't beating the Heat team in the second round. They would have had another second round exit. So what can you ask more of JB Bickerstaff? He's maximized this roster. He's gotten guys to work around the 4 main players for Cleveland and Max Strus. You got Tyresse Haliburton there, Georges Niang, Marcus Morris Sr. coming in and reviving himself under JB Bickerstaff. Bickerstaff has done great things, and that's the only reason is the Donovan Mitchell talks that I can see Bickerstaff getting fired, because maybe he just didn't like him. And at the end of the day, in today's NBA, you value your star players over the coaches. You do. And it's for how bad a team's been, for how bad a team's been constructed, it doesn't matter. All the blame is getting put on these head coaches, and it's not fair. But at the end of the day, if you're the coaches, you know what you signed up for. It's a tough market. It's a tough job. You know, even if you do a somewhat decent job, your job could be on the line, because you think about it, how many coaches have been fired? I think there's only been 3 coaches that have been on the same team since 2015. I think that's Michael Malone with Denver. I think he got hired in 2015. Spo, he got hired in 2008. And then Greg Popovich, he got hired like 1999. Those are the only 3 coaches who have been with the same team. The teams who have not fired their coaches in these past 8 seasons, which is ridiculous. 27 coaching changes. That just tells you how hard the market is to be a head coach, how hard it is to work with the team. And even if you have some success, your job can still be on the line. You have to be perfect if you're a head coach. And it's a tough job and it's a tough business. And we've seen it in the NBA more than the NFL, more than other sports leagues, that this is not an easy job. And your job can be on the line every day. And it's tough if you're Bickerstaff, because I think he did great. And I think Bickerstaff deserves another head coaching opportunity. I know he was the interim with the Memphis Grizzlies after they fired Fizdale, and he did a good job there. He did, of course, a great job with Cleveland, as we've been emphasizing. Bickerstaff deserves another opportunity to be a head coach. And I think Adrian Griffin does as well with the Milwaukee Bucks, even though he got fired. And I think Frank Vogel does as well. I think all of these guys are great head coaches. And maybe not Adrian Griffin as much as Vogel and Bickerstaff, but Adrian Griffin maybe get an opportunity with a younger team. But at the end of the day, these coaches are getting fired, and it's really, there's no major explanation to why. Really not. There's just no logical reason, but yet it still happens, and that is what today's NBA has become. And we'll see what happens with the Cavaliers. We'll see what these Mitchell talks hold. Of course, Mitchell can sign to an extension starting after the NBA Finals ends, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's a new rule. Yeah. When the NBA Finals ends, Donovan Mitchell can negotiate his contract extension. We'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But it's going to be an interesting offseason because, as I mentioned, Cleveland Cavaliers want to make moves because they don't think this roster is working well together. And we'll see what happens. Maybe Cleveland can get another star in there. Maybe Cleveland fails to find a star and has to run it back with this roster. And we'll see that how Donovan Mitchell is affected by that. It's going to be a very long offseason for Cleveland, and they are going to be one of the more intriguing teams to watch this offseason. I mentioned this in their Lights Out video, but Cleveland may set the bar for what this offseason will become, because I expect them to make at least a trade, if not multiple trades, to dramatically shift their roster. And it can all start with them, and it can all go chaos from there. And as I said, it's the NBA. You got to see what happens. You don't know, because the unpredictable is what most likely is going to happen. And that's just how it is. And that's my take on the Cavs firing JB Bickerstaff. It's just crazy to me, but it's a business at the end of the day, and you just got to go by it. But let's go on to the Western Conference Finals here, recapping Game 1. As the Dallas Mavericks go into Minnesota, what I did not expect to happen, because I expected Minnesota to win this series in 5, which is most likely not going to happen anymore. Dallas goes in there wins 108-105 behind the efforts of course, their two best players in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic to steal home court advantage. Now have an opportunity to go up 2-0, steal 2 games on the road, and it was all because of Luka Magic and Kyrie effing Irving. Let's start with the first quarter here. Kyrie Irving is a wizard for this Dallas Mavericks team. The impact that Kyrie Irving has had for this team is something that is wondrous, something that we have not seen in a very long time with his career, something that I don't think we've ever seen, because we've always questioned Kyrie's leadership. We've always questioned what Kyrie has been able to do with the team. We've questioned his ability as a best player, and we question why he left Cleveland, why he had to get away from Cleveland even though they were winning. And Kyrie Irving has pretty much silenced all of those questions. He has been the sole leader of this team, and they are doing something that we thought couldn't have been done with this Dallas team, especially after getting the 11th seed last year. They are in the conference finals. They are 3 wins away from the NBA finals, and it is because of Kyrie Irving's leadership, what Kyrie Irving has brought to the table this season, and how he has improved at that aspect of the game. It hasn't even been his play. It's been him mentoring guys like Josh Green, him encouraging guys like Derek Lively. He has been that guy for Dallas, and it's been something that's beautiful to see, and you've got to give Kyrie Irving a lot of props there. And, of course, you got to go on the court and as well and look at his game, because in the first quarter, Kyrie Irving was taking over the game, really giving the Mavericks some life, because the Timberwolves were, if I'm not mistaken, in control for a lot of this first quarter. And you look at it and, Dallas is not getting blown out. It looked like Minnesota was blowing out Dallas, but for some reason they weren't. It was a close game, and it was because Kyrie Irving got to the rim. He did what he did best, attacked the rim, got fouled, hit some jump shots. Kyrie Irving was showing his ability to score, and it worked to perfection in that first half. And he really kept Dallas in the game when Minnesota was off to a hot start. And we'll get into Minnesota, of course, in 10 minutes. But for right now, this is all about Dallas. This is what Dallas did, and it was because of the start Kyrie Irving had to lead them in this basketball game. And early, as I mentioned, it was a little bit scary for Dallas. They were fouling early. They were struggling against the pick and roll. That pick and roll really killed them, from the Jaden McDaniels getting open from 3, Rudy Gobert getting open in the paint. Dallas was not playing great at all in the first quarter. It was like, here we go. Minnesota's harassing them. Dallas is struggling, and this is most likely going to be a Minnesota win. But then in comes Derek Lively for Daniel Gafford. And now, I love Daniel Gafford, but the way Derek Lively has been playing, he has by far been the superior center. He has by far been, in this last couple of games, the 3rd most impactful player for this Mavericks team. Derek Lively, his pick and roll confused the defense. The pick and roll with Kyrie Irving has just been beautiful. They confused Minnesota's defense. They ran some things that we haven't seen all season long from Dallas, which is a pick and roll high from Derek Lively. Got inside, Derek Lively got into the middle, and he was the one who started creating the offense. He was the guy who started passing the ball a little bit, and that's something we haven't seen from Dallas all season long, doing that. And it confused Minnesota a little bit. It got Minnesota a little bit off guard, and it really worked to Dallas's advantage. And Derek Lively made some great passes, and sometimes Derek Lively didn't get the ball back. Kyrie Irving went downhill, and of course they went to their lob game, which also worked to perfection as well. Derek Lively coming into the game, making an impact on the offensive end, got Dallas going a little bit after Kyrie Irving was really the only one who was doing anything on the offensive side of the ball for Dallas, and Luka Doncic was struggling, and Derek Lively, once again for the Dallas team, settled them down, got them to where they needed to be, and kept them in a position close to where Minnesota was. And you've also got Dallas, because of Derek Lively now in the middle, because of Kyrie Irving's shot making. Dallas was now attacking the paint. Dallas now, because of the shot making, because of Derek Lively's pick and roll, they were getting into the paint easily. And it was because of the efforts of those two guys, like I said, but that really opened up for other guys to get in the paint as well, because Minnesota was really keening in on that pick and roll from Irving and Lively, because it was working so well in the first quarter. And it got guys like Derrick Jones going a little bit. It got guys like PJ Washington going a little bit to the paint, and even a little bit on the outside as well. Those two really opened up the offense a little bit for Dallas, and it got them going in the first half and in the second half as well. And for Dallas defensively in the first half, they were really, for most of the game, trying to let the other guys beat them. They were trying to let guys like Kyle Anderson, guys like Jaden McDaniels beat them, and it didn't work in the first half. Jaden McDaniels had a great first half. Kyle Anderson had a great first half. But in the second half, those guys cooled off a little bit, and the Dallas's plan worked to perfection. Dallas saw those guys struggling a little bit. They took advantage. They got the lead in the second half, and it was because of that. They keyed in on Anthony Edwards. They harassed Anthony Edwards, and we'll get into Anthony Edwards in a little bit. But Anthony Edwards looked tired. Anthony Edwards was tired going down the stretch because Dallas's goal, was to harass Anthony Edwards, was to harass Karl-Anthony Towns. Though that was Dallas's goal. Don't let those two guys get going. Let the other guys beat them. And it didn't work in the first half, but it worked to perfection in the second half. And sometimes it's better off that way because the second half is when the basketball really matters. Also, it was for Luka Doncic not really the best of first halves, not really the best of games until really the fourth quarter. Luka Doncic was struggling once again, and it's understandable because you've got Jaden McDaniels on you. But you're going to need Luka Doncic to perform 48 minutes if Dallas wants to win the series. And it looked like, how could Minnesota not take advantage of this? Dallas was shooting really bad. Doncic was struggling because of Jaden McDaniels. Minnesota didn't take advantage, and Dallas really kept on creeping in this game. And it made no sense because Dallas didn't play a great game. Dallas didn't have a perfect game. It was really Kyrie Irving and Derek Lively for most of the game who was contributing offensively. And then in the second half, Kyrie took a step back. Now it was Luka Doncic contributing offensively. And the fact of the matter is, Dallas should have not won this basketball game. And the fact that they won this basketball game is concerning for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we'll get into that, as I mentioned, in a couple of minutes. But it wasn't perfect for Dallas, which maybe not the best to look for, maybe not hopeful at all, not showing a lot of stuff, but yet they found a way to win. So I don't really know how to evaluate Dallas winning this basketball game. Is it like, oh, they won this game even with playing bad, so they should dominate the series? Or it's like, oh, they've continued to have these questionable games and they got away with this one, but are they going to get away with it from the rest of the series? It's really tough to evaluate Dallas's performance in this series. I just don't know what to say overall in this series because they had some great moments, but yet at the same point, their guys were struggling a little bit shooting. They had a terrible shooting performance from the three-point line. If I'm not mistaken, they only hit 2 threes from the first half compared to Minnesota's 11 threes in the first half. And I'm like, how was Dallas in this game? How was Dallas down only 3 points? And it was because of guys like Kyrie Irving keeping them in the games. And the fight of this Dallas team to find ways to continue to be in games that they're not supposed to be in because they've struggled against the Thunder. Remember, game 6 against OKC, they were down big. They looked like, oh, they shouldn't have won, but yet they found ways to win. And offensively, as I said, struggling. It's been the defense. It's been the defense for Dallas. And it's something that came out of nowhere for Dallas. And I'm going to continue to say this. This is the most incredible defensive turnaround that I have seen ever. Dallas was exposed on defense every single friggin' time last season. It was like Dallas was having these high scoring games. They were ultimately losing, and they were giving teams that weren't great on offense good shots. They were giving great offensive teams even better shots. Dallas's defense was one of the worst I've ever seen last season. And the fact that they improved this defense to the point where they are now beating Minnesota in what was a grit and grind game, in a game that shots weren't falling for Dallas, shots weren't really going that much for Minnesota other from the three-point line. Dallas won that game. That is something that is championship caliber. Winning on both sides, because we've seen Dallas win offensively all of the time. But the fact that Dallas showed they can beat Minnesota at their own game, just like Boston did with Indiana, Dallas beat Minnesota with their own game, winning in this defensive grit and grind contest. That shows Dallas has a great opportunity to win this series, great opportunity to beat this Minnesota basketball team. And I was wrong. I have to say it. I was wrong. I didn't expect this. But Dallas's defense has continued to impress, and that is the reason why they have continued to win basketball games. So that is my take on the Dallas Mavericks right there. And of course, I expect Minnesota to win game 2, but Dallas got the job done. They stole home court. Now, if you're Dallas, when you go back to your home court, you have to control it now. You have to assert yourselves on both sides of the ball. And we'll see how Dallas responds, especially if they lose game 2, which I'd be shocked if Minnesota lost game 2. But you never know what's going to happen because it's the postseason. But we'll see how Dallas responds. We'll see if Dallas gets kicked in the butt. We'll see if Dallas makes it interesting in game 2. We'll see if Dallas steals it and goes up 2-0. It's going to be an interesting series. I thought this wasn't going to be an interesting series, but Dallas, by efforts of winning game 1, have made this an interesting series. And yes, I was wrong. You got to give credit to Dallas because they are winning on both sides of the basketball. But let's go on to the Minnesota Timberwolves sides of things, the losing sides of things in this basketball game, as they failed to execute late down the stretch. In this 108-105 loss, they were up 4 with 3 minutes to go, and they lost the game. Let's just go through how they lost this basketball game. So Minnesota, early in this game, I noticed they tried to get Karl-Anthony Towns open, which was great, which was something that they're supposed to do, but Dallas was keying in on him, so they had to find other options to score, and they did. As I mentioned earlier, Jaden McDaniels had an amazing start to the basketball game offensively. And that's something we haven't seen from Jaden McDaniels in the regular season. And he's really improved offensively on the postseason. And we're like, oh, if Jaden McDaniels can do this, Minnesota can surely win this game and this series because it just gives Minnesota another option offensively. But at the end of the day, Towns wasn't playing that great. He got into foul trouble once again. Anthony Edwards wasn't playing that great. And at the end of the day, if your stars don't outplay the other stars, that's why you lose series. At the end of the day, we love the role players, we love the other guys, but it is mano v mano, star v star. And Minnesota, Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns just didn't outplay Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And Jaden McDaniels tried to help. Jaden McDaniels really played great. And Kyle Anderson as well. Kyle Anderson played probably his best game offensively in this postseason so far. And yet, Minnesota still lost this game. Minnesota shot 11 threes in the first half. They made 11 threes in the first half. Not shot 11 threes. They made 11 threes in the first half. Dallas made 2 in the first half. Yet, they lost this basketball game. Minnesota, the way they were playing, the way Dallas wasn't shooting the ball because of Minnesota's defense, of course. There was like no way should Minnesota have lost this game, and yet they did because they folded in the second half because their stars weren't playing to par and they weren't getting offensive rebounds. And Anthony Edwards, just as I said, he was a no-show, and he, to me, looked very, very tired at the end of the game. And that was because Kyrie Irving harassed him. That was because a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. harassed Anthony Edwards. And you've got to give credit to Dallas for that because Anthony Edwards, he did not look like himself. He was all out of sorts. He was missing shots. He was almost so tired that I thought, is he going to ask out of this basketball game in this close game? That's how tired Anthony Edwards looked, and it's a concern. And maybe you can say, oh, it was a quick turnaround against Denver. You had the game 7. You put so much emotion into that series. You put so much toughness. You gave it your all in that series. And you have this quick turnaround, and Anthony Edwards is tired, and that's understandable. But Dallas only had a day extra of rest, if I'm not mistaken. Dallas didn't have that much rest, and they had to travel as well to Minnesota, just like Minnesota had to travel from Denver as well. So there's not really that much excuse that you can give here. I know there was so much emotional ability, so much effort put into that Denver series, but at the same point, you're in the conference finals. This is the postseason. You don't got a lot of days off. You just got to go until the finish line. And that's what's tough about winning the championship. That shows your adversity as a team, your adversity as an individual, your stamina as an individual. And Anthony Edwards did not show that. And I hope we don't see this concern going down the stretch for the series. But it is something to be noted because, trust me, if Anthony Edwards wasn't tired, if Anthony Edwards did paint in the ground, Minnesota would have won that basketball game. It wouldn't have even been close. But Kyrie Irving harassed him. Who else? Yes, Derek Jones harassed him and got him tired. And also, Anthony Edwards poked the bear a little bit in this game. Poked the bear against Kyrie Irving. I remember post-game TNT after Game 7 of Dallas. He's like, I want Kyrie Irving. I want Mr. Irving. And Kyrie Irving took that personally, and Kyrie Irving absolutely balled out. He balled out, and he outplayed Anthony Edwards, and you just got to say, great job, and I got to come back better. Because Anthony Edwards has been great this postseason, but in the Game 7 didn't play that great. This game didn't play great. A little bit of a rough stretch, but the only way Minnesota is going to win the series by looking at what Dallas has done defensively is going to be on the efforts of Anthony Edwards. It's going to be all on him because we love this Minnesota success story. Oh, they haven't made the conference finals in 20 years, yada, yada, yada. Oh, they beat the defending champs. Well, you're here in the conference finals now. We have to treat you like you're a star if you're Anthony Edwards. We have to critique you now. And you broke down. This is not, love story. This is not a happy story. No matter what happens, we'll be happy. No, we've got to treat you critical because you are a star in the conference finals right now. You are a star expecting to win the series. You are a team that, to me, on paper, the way they played this season is better than the Dallas Mavericks, and Anthony Edwards didn't perform great. You've got to critique him, and he played terrible, and he's got to play better in order for Minnesota to win this series. And so does Karl-Anthony Towns, because Karl-Anthony Towns gotten into foul trouble lately, hasn't been this perfect guy. And in order for Minnesota to win the series, Karl-Anthony Towns can't shoot 6 for 20 from the field. He can't shoot 2 for 9 from the three-point line, and he can't have these struggling shooting performances because those two are the guys who have scored the most for the season. And when Minnesota is not that great of an offense, even because they rely so heavily on their defense, because of how lackluster their offense is, they're not that great, and they're going to need guys to score the ball. And I love Jaden McDaniels. I love Kyle Anderson. I even love Naz Reid. He had a great game, 15 points. But at the end of the day, your stars are the ones who are going to take you to the finish line. They're going to take it to the promised land. And those guys have to have better performances. And Anthony Edwards, a -1. Karl-Anthony Towns, a -5. That's just not going to get it. That's just not going to get it done. It's not. And Minnesota has basically a must-win game. I'm filming this Friday. They've got to win today. They play game 2 today on TNT in Minnesota. They've got to win today. It's a must-win. So what are we going to see from Anthony Edwards? What are we going to see from Karl-Anthony Towns that shows that they can be in the series? Because for how good Minnesota is at the end of the day, stars got to play well. And that's my spiel for Minnesota. And then also something that Minnesota had a concern with is the turnovers. The turnovers for Minnesota was killing them a little bit. Not necessarily throughout the whole game, but in the second half, Minnesota lacked that in the second half. They turned the ball over. They let Dallas in the game. And they also gave up a lot of offensive rebounds. And I remember the play after Minnesota got up 4. Dallas missed a 3. And it was like, Minnesota's going to get the ball up 4 in control with under 3 to go. Offensive rebound by Derek Lively. Kick out to Doncic. Doncic hits a 3. Now it's a 1-point game. Now it's an interesting game. That play to me was a killer for Minnesota because I feel like if they would have just gotten that rebound, that might have. Of course, there's 4 minutes to go and anything can happen. Actually, not 4. It was under 2 minutes to go. Around 2 to 3 minutes. Anything can happen, right? It's still plenty of time left. But it just would have felt like that Minnesota would have been in control. And yet they let that offensive rebound happen, and they let Dallas win this game. And it got a little bit interesting at the end because Mike Conley got the 3 free throws, and Dallas made a stupid foul. But Mike Conley missed some free throws as well. They just lacked execution down the stretch. And at the end of the day, for how good you play in a game, for how much you deserve to win a basketball game like Minnesota did, especially in that first half. They deserve to win this basketball game. They were the better team, just like Indiana was in game 1 in their Eastern Conference Finals. Minnesota should have won this game, and they deserve to. But at the end of the day, if you don't execute down the stretch for how good you played in those 46 minutes, those last 2 minutes are going to be the reason why you lose basketball games. And most of the time, it really does in postseasons come down to the last 2 minutes. The last 46 minutes, you can wipe away, doesn't matter. If you can't execute in those last 2 minutes when it matters the most, you are not going to win games. And that is my take on why Minnesota lost this game. And they're going to have to come back strong, or else their season is going to be in jeopardy going into game 3 in Dallas. And that's all I've got for you today. Of course, recapping the Western Conference Finals, game 1, Eastern Conference Finals, game 2, and talking about JB Bickerstaff getting fired. That is it for the greatest show on earth. That is it for the Take Your Shot podcast. I am Joshua Gitman. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, please leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. That would mean so much to me and my growth in this channel. Also, follow me on Instagram at take_you_shot_podcast_ and tell me how you would have taken your shots on these takes. That's all my shots for the week. See you next week after we have 2 games of the Western Conference Finals. We'll find out game 2 and game 3 of that series. We'll find out game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. It's going to be great, and we're going to break it all down on Monday morning, and we'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the basketball as we are inching closer to the NBA Finals. See you next week, folks.